So I've been thinking about the different discussions I've seen regarding the three different levels of social issues. And the three that are discussed are the individual, societal, and systemic. I really don't get them. Can you explain more?
Think about the challenges you face throughout your life. They won't all be the same. I may have a personal problem or a social problem that is related to my community, or experience a barrier, which is systemic, meaning it relates to social structures such as our government or education. Knowing that there are layers means that I can think about solving those issues in different ways. Does that make sense? For example, I might have a problem that is about me, about my experiences or barriers. But I might see that other people have similar issues too, and although they are different to mine, they might all be related to social or systemic issues. But ultimately, that problem is still individual to me.
So does that mean, if I can give you an example, if I grew up in a hearing family and they didn't sign, linguistic progress would be limited and there would be real communication issues there. Then I go to school, and yes, I'm talking about a hearing mainstream school. They speak, I miss a lot of information, I really struggle, and then I leave feeling excluded with a real lack of access. Is that what happens at the individual level?
Exactly. So that is an individual problem because it is specific to you and your experiences. But it is also a wider issue. You've talked about your personal experience, but imagine that you grew up in a deaf family where everyone used sign language, and then you went to a mainstream school. You would still experience that communication barrier. We've both attended a hearing school, but the difference is that my family were all deaf and yours were hearing. So we both had a similar school experience, but our individual challenges were different.
Okay, now that's clear, yeah. So say we take two children with hearing parents. One has parents who have learned sign language and signs with them. They have that language acquisition. And the other child's parents don't sign. They both go to the same school, but they'd have completely different experiences.
That's individual. We might go to the same school and receive the same education, but my life experiences are different, so we won't experience it in the same way.
Now I get it.
We're currently advocating for accessibility in schools, but it's important to consider home life too.
Thanks for explaining about the individual level. I understand that now. If we now move on to the societal, what do we mean by the societal level?
Imagine that I have an issue. Who do I talk about it with? Who's in my network? If I'm deaf and everyone around me is hearing, I can't talk to them about it. I can't easily arrange to do something fun with friends, like go out the weekend, or shopping, or out for a meal. I might end up feeling really isolated. And that could be true for anyone from a minority group, like being the only black or LGBT person in a group and realising that you're surrounded by people who you can't identify with. There are both positives and negatives to this. We need people in our lives not only to support us during difficult times, but also to share in and celebrate our joyful moments. But people can still feel really lonely even when they're in a crowd. Like the Deaf Club example. A black deaf person may want to spend time with other black people in their community, but what if they're all hearing? They can go to the Deaf Club, but what if everyone there is white?
I can think of an example of that. Say I work with hearing people every day, no one signs, but then socially I can meet with other deaf people. We all sign, we all have that shared life experience. Without that, I'd be isolated both in and out of work. Is that what you mean?
Right, in a hearing world. If you work in a hearing world, it is exhausting, and by the time you get home, you just want to switch off and relax. If everyone at home is hearing too, you will have spent your working day lip reading, and then you go home and you have to do the same there as well. Deaf people need spaces where they can just switch off and use their language, but if you don't have that,
And also, if you think of a different person, so they work with hearing people who don't sign, and then socially they meet other deaf people who are all white, and they're a black deaf person, they don't have that connection. They need access to a group with that commonality.
Of course, you need to be around people who you can identify with.
Yeah, I mean, that's important. Without that, That'll lead to isolation, frustration, no real social outlet.
I'm a lesbian, I have friends who are straight, sexuality isn't an issue, but I need to spend time with people from my community because of that shared experience. That is the influence of society, it affects our mental health, and when we can talk about our frustrations with people who get it, it helps. Not only can we access support, but we can positively engage with those communities socially. If those networks aren't available to us, it can have a negative effect on our health.
Wow. So we've talked about the individual level and we've talked about the societal level. I get those now. How does the systemic fit in?
The law is a good example. We know that deaf people have a right to access in their everyday lives, and that should be protected by legislation, but it's not. That's because the law does not always support us as it should. The same can be said for deaf people accessing financial resources, employment, benefits, even education. Think of all the deaf schools that have closed over the years, pushing deaf children into mainstream education, where access to the curriculum can be challenging. These are all systemic issues.
So that would mean if maybe, say, I grew up with parents who didn't sign, had those struggles, and then you go to the workplace or school, again, you don't have full access in different environments like that, you wouldn't feel you fit in anywhere. You'd feel oppressed on all fronts, and that would really affect your well-being and mental health.
And your confidence levels. If I need some advice, how do I know where to go? It often depends on where you live. If I live in an urban area, I might be near to a deaf club or organisation that can help. But if I don't know sign language, or I'm not able to use written English to communicate, or if no deaf organisation is available in my area, I may have to rely on a hearing organisation, and there's no guarantee that they will book interpreters. This is what it is like when deaf people have to navigate systems in a hearing world that isn't designed for them.
If we imagined the system was changed for the best, that would affect everything on a societal level and the individual level. As an individual, your parents could go and learn sign language, they'd be able to communicate with you, and then you'd have that sign language acquisition. Then you go to school, you could access your education in sign, and you've got that basis of language to access it. Interpreters would be provided because the system, the law, would say they must be provided for access. At work, you'd be able to fit in. It would just make every aspect of life better, wouldn't it?
Can you imagine starting your education from the age of 4 or 5 years old, right up until the age of 18? That's a long time. Imagine being able to access that education in sign language. Embedding sign language at the start would set solid foundations, giving deaf children the language that they need to understand their feelings, to help them identify when they're upset, sad, angry, or happy. They can only do that if they have the language and because the school have given them the opportunity to learn it. The children can engage socially with their peers, they'll play sports and share toys, learning how to take turns and regulate their emotions. Then, when they're sat together in a classroom, they feel more confident to engage with the learning because they've already been given the tools that they need. When those same children engage with the hearing world, it might still be hard, but they will have developed resilience nurtured throughout their education. That resilience will help them to navigate employment opportunities, earn a living wage, manage finances effectively, so that they don't have to worry so much about paying the bills or having enough food to eat. They can have a life that they enjoy, and that all starts with an accessible education. Life is harder without one.
Thank you. I really understand now the issues at an individual, societal, and systemic level.